Hey everybody, my name is Phil. I am doing another interview with my friend and also client, Keith Percy. He has been with me, I think, almost 3 years now. I think he's one of my first patients that I started with. I've known Keith a long time. I've worked with him when he worked fire and I worked in the ER. Like, I know Keith. He's a great guy, and I think you're going to really enjoy this interview. I'm just going to introduce a little bit about Keith so you have some context. Keith has been married for 10 years and brings a wealth of experience from several fields. He's worked in civil engineering for 7 years while pursuing his education. Then he shifted his gears to being a paramedic. He's been a paramedic for 5 years. He also has taught a lot of students, paramedic students, followed by 4 years as a paramedic firefighter. Now he's on a path to away from the kind of paramedicine field, and he's studying to become a nurse anesthetist, doing prerequisites at ASU and Yavapai College, where he believes he can make the greatest impact in helping people. And so I'm really excited to do this interview. I think, Keith, you're a very unique person.
Should be fun. He means that in a good way, for the record.
In a great way. Like you're a special, and I appreciate all our conversations and all of yeah, we talk about a lot of stuff, and this goes outside of work, and we'll talk more about that as the interview goes. So first off, Keith, if you can kind of give us your background and how you came to testosterone, kind of the initial symptoms you were experiencing, and how you decided to come on testosterone.
Sure. So man, that would probably start. I was right in the beginning of COVID era, so I got COVID real bad, and I'd been sober for probably about 3 years at that time, and I was trying everything I knew. Like I knew there was something wrong with motivation and the way that I was thinking. Memory was kind of in the tanks, but I was attributing that to some previous lifestyle choices, perhaps, and so I really dug in. I've been kind of the guy who goes in and does his homework with stuff. So I'm gonna turn off my alerts here. And at that time, I was researching, what are the benefits of a gentleman my age? At that time, I believe, 37, going and getting on TRT. And I'll admit I had these preconceived notions and whatnot about it, and I was timid. I believed a lot of the stuff that I had heard about it as far as the negative. Like, there's this rhetoric, like, it's like you just should TRT, you know what I mean? And I just had this like bad notion about it. And the more I did my homework, the more I looked at peer-reviewed journals and studies and really dove into people who really knew far more than I do. And I listened to them. I sat there with just kind of this bias, open mind, and I weighed what they're saying over here, and I listened to the other side too. And what I found was this path in the middle, which allowed me this opportunity to, pray and meditate. I had my way of making decisions, and I made an appointment. And that's when I actually met Phil. One of the times we sat down and we kind of talked about my symptomology, and I'd filled out some paperwork, and that's kind of how the journey started.
Yeah, and I remember that visit. I mean, you were very inquisitive. You came armed. You're like, what about this? What about this? What about this? And I love those conversations because I do the research. I'm passionate about the research.
Yeah.
It's changed my life, and I use evidence-based practice to treat people. And so I really appreciated having somebody that was like, okay, this guy's actually serious about his health. He wants to change his life. He feels like, the other things aren't working. So let's explore this a little bit deeper. And you took that to the nth level. It's like you have to understand every little part of testosterone and why you're taking it, what dose you're taking, all those types of things. And I appreciate that about you. I really do. You're like, what about this, Phil? What about this? You asked me a lot of questions.
I did.
Yeah.
Still
So,
do from time to time.
and I appreciate that. Even the woo woo stuff that I think woo is woo woo, but haven't really tested it. So don't have a good understanding, like red light therapy. I'm still thinking that's a little bit woo
Yeah,
woo.
dude, we're gonna do a whole segment on that, bro. What he's talking about is this thing called photobiomodulation. Ah!
Right now, we're talking about testosterone. Yeah.
I
He
knew
goes,
I'd get him riled up. I gotta poke him every once in a while.
yeah, he has sent me so not it's honestly, I haven't looked at it very much, but I trust you, dude. I need to look at it. I just haven't yet. Okay.
I
So
would I would add up to that point. I think what I failed to mention was, I wanted to, once I found out the information, for me personally, I went through the whole, eat 10 egg yolks a day and like, VO2 max scores. And I really got into zone 2 cardio and interval training, hit workouts. That became like my whole routine. So I did everything physiologically possible to see if, maybe it was a deficit on my part, right? That perhaps it has something to do with my diet. Maybe it does have something to do with some, past choices, right? That we'll get to. And bottom line was when I had exhausted all that and I had given my body 3 years to, fully defrag and do everything I possibly could on the spiritual, mental, and physical plane, that I still found myself in a deficit. So I just really want to lay the groundwork to what we're about to talk about.
You remember what your initial testosterone levels were?
I was just looking at that. I was like, I bet this is gonna come up. It was at 520, somewhere around there. Free was down to like 11.1, and SPGHs were, I believe, at 32.
So when we test you, we want to really figure out kind of how your body drinks up the hormones and whether it's associated with your age and whether it correlates with your age, right? So, and I've said this in several interviews, normal testosterone is between 3 and 1200, and most doctors, and you probably experienced this, they say, get out of my office, you're totally fine. Your levels are quote unquote normal, but they don't treat symptoms of low testosterone, right? And you're being the young age you were, you had the testosterone of a 60-year-old guy. And when you take that into consideration along with all the symptoms of low testosterone, we have to fix that. Like it's not like tomorrow you're going to wake up and be producing optimal levels of testosterone. No, we have, as a society, have really screwed ourselves up. And I think our ancestors had a much higher testosterone than we have as a society today. And you see that everywhere. Plus, you work fire, you're in high cortisol, high stress, a job, and that's a big deal. You have to think about that, right? And so there is a strong correlation between high cortisol levels and low testosterone. And so we're seeing this as an epidemic across the world of low testosterone as a society. So I'm on a mission to kind of combat that. Number one. Number two, combat all the misconceptions around being a somewhat younger guy, by young 30 to 40, with low testosterone. And so that's why we're having these conversations. So again, thank you, Keith, for talking. You had symptoms of low testosterone. What were those symptoms?
For me, in generalized format, what I would say is my recovery was real slow when it came to workouts. I wouldn't say I was necessarily prone to injury because I was way into like myofascial regen. My wife's a yoga instructor, and the whole nine. I can go down the whole rabbit hole with that. But I did notice that recovery was just kind of lacking. It wasn't keeping up with what I knew I can do. Granted, getting older, I understand that, I get it, but for me, it came down to going back and start my prereqs is when it really got my attention, and my neurocognitive abilities I noticed were lacking. I was like, I mean, it felt like I hit a wall, right? Where I was like, I have absolutely done everything I possibly can, but like I believed in my heart that not only was there a better quality of life, is that I wasn't doing my best. And what I mean by that is that I knew the bar that I was looking at, right? I'm looking at health span, right? Not just this idea of like, all the patients I'd run on, okay? And they have 15 meds and they just retired last year, okay? And I'm sitting there going, this is where it all goes? Like, what? I don't want to be 54 and like dilapidated and succumb to this, like, for lack of a better term, need to abide in this allopathic, ideology, so to speak. And in those moments, it was refreshing. And my way to deal with that type of PTSD at the time was to get into fitness and to learn everything I knew about physiology and pathophys and really dive in, as I've mentioned. And so I became of the mindset, there's a couple really good books out there. One of them, Peter Attia's Outlive. That's one of my favorite books. So reading through that, when the guy's like, Peter's being plagued by these dreams in there, right? Where he left the medical field. He also did civil engineering, so I related with him. And so the way his mind works like mine, and he left it and did finance. And then when he came back around again, he was having this dream of catching these eggs in this basket, and it was plaguing him. And he's like, oh, I don't understand this silly dream. And one day it dawned on him. He's like, we need to catch the person throwing the eggs. We need to quit trying to run around and grab the eggs as they fall. And so he started to describe that to me the way I learned it's like medicine 2.0 and 3.0. And that's this idea that, you know, we can focus on very positive attributes. One of them that was at the top for me was VO2 max. And that in all of its studies and the intricacy, and for those who aren't aware, that's just a generalized saying that it's a measurement of your body's efficiency of utilizing oxygen, not just in one system, right? So we're not just taking a BP, we're not just taking an EKG, we're not just looking at one aspect. It's more like a lab draw. It's like overall, how well does Keith's body work when he's performing at top rate like a car, man, when he's hitting his high RPMs and at baseline, you know? Does he have any like clogged pipes, you know? Can he benefit from a tune-up, or, you know, is he running the right octane? Right. And despite putting 91, 93 octane in my body every day, I was performing for, you know, anyone owns a Civic, no offense, but like a small little Honda Civic putting around, man. And I knew I could do better. I knew I was at least an M3, you know, I was at least an M3.
Yeah. So I agree. And that's how I kind of came to being on testosterone myself. I weighed 50 pounds heavier, was exhausted, had no libido. I just didn't want to get out of bed in the morning. And my whole life has been changed. Like I feel like it's given me kind of a new lease on life, you know? And would you relate to that?
Yeah, I like where you're tracking with that is, and that would be the rest of the answer to your question there, is that some of the symptomology, it was definitely the low libido, and that was becoming an issue on an interpersonal level with my wife. And I kind of started to feel guilty about that. I'll be honest with you. I felt like it was my fault at times, you know, and that's not right. I felt like that was a disservice to my wife. Just the overall motivation. I found more motivation after starting treatment, where it's not this super physiologic, right? That's like a good way that I've heard it. It's like optimization. It's just finding where each individual optimizes. I think of it as that old, what was that, NBA Jam, right? When you got a player and they'd be like good in certain areas and not so good. Like Shaq's like all about like slamming the ball, speed. He's like this much out of a bar that big. So I just found that like everyone's got their own bars, man. And for me personally, I felt described that, you know what, I think I can benefit in these certain areas. And what really helped me was looking into the data and really looking at the research that there's a reduction in all-cause mortality. Like that hit me hard, is that when you take it as a blanket statement, when a male has optimized levels of testosterone, not super physiologic, so we're not talking about, you know, the roid rage and all that stuff. It's not even close to that. All it is just a way to get this up and reach that like therapeutic level and to just ride that. And that's all it is. And it took time. It took about a year to kind of get up there and have some changes happen in the body and sleep cycle. And sleep was an issue, obviously. And I was veering away from, I was on 4896s at the time. So that's 48 hours on and 96 hours off in firefighting. So I'd get up in the middle of the night, right? So I had no circadian. So I was getting away from that and starting to get a circadian again. And that's where I found that no matter what I did, like, you know, doing the whole reset, the red light in the morning, red light in the evening, the stimulating the suprachiasmatic nucleus on top of the mouth, and like, you know, just dug into it. And I do all that, you know, the Gary Brecka, the whole nine, man. And despite my best efforts, I still found, man, I was like that dude who you didn't want to be in NBA Jam because he just didn't quite make the cut.
Yeah, and it just makes me recall. You make me laugh, man, because like when we first met, you had all these like questions, and I'm like, man, I haven't really thought about that. Like you're really like challenging my own medical model that I've had, and I really appreciate all these. I mean, we've had many conversations since then, but like you are always trying to be better. You are always trying to find new things with your health. You are always trying to experiment with your health. And what I appreciate is that you trust me and that we've been together for a long time and that you respect an opinion that I have, you know, and we can have that healthy dialogue. You're not like, screw you, Phil, you don't know what you're talking about and you're done, you know. but you actually listened, you talked to me, we were able to have a conversation about testosterone, and now you're on it, and man, your life has been changed, I think, on it. And that's just one thing, one area where your life was changed. I would also like to talk to a little bit more about a very much more personal aspect of your life, and also very personal to me, and another area that we really connect on and didn't connect on until kind of crap hit the fan in both of our lives, I guess. And it's the topic of recovery. You're in recovery, I'm in recovery, and if you wouldn't mind being a little authentic with whoever this is going to go out to about your experience in recovery, and kind of if testosterone has helped that, and kind of our relationship in that specific sense.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, I'll be honest, man. I was hesitant, like being in that context of like, okay, so I don't want to be utilizing alcohol and drugs as just this way to, deal with life, right? It caused far more problems than it offered solution, right? And that used to be the other way, right? I used to enjoy that. I used to have fun. I was productive. It helped in life. I'm not going to lie. But when it came time to like really clean up a person, like not just physically, right? I mean, I'm talking about processing internal things, and not like in a CBT format or whatever they call those abbreviations in psychology. It was like from the ground up, man. I mean, on a sincere thing, really going back and doing my best to face the individual that I became through my own decisions, and start to acknowledge the fact that it's no one else's fault. It never has been, and it never will be. And though that works as an anesthetic in its own right, sometimes to have an excuse, right? The excuses were gone. And it was like, hey man, no one's going to take care of you. No one's like, it's you, man. It is the real world grown man situation, and life's changing. You're changing. You're no different than every other person on this earth. Right. And what are you going to do about it? And that became the question, is like, all right, so are you all in, or are you like just wanting to make this problem go away? Or like, hey, if I could just kind of appease this situation and then I'll go ahead and do something different. And for me, I'd say that one of the biggest liabilities I had in life was that the mindset of all or nothing. And that actually became one of the greatest assets, is that, in the hands of something greater than me, the things that have come are better than anything I can plan. And that takes even those defective traits, as far as, honing in on something and digging in and finding out everything, it just turned it into a very positive experience. And what I found is that TRT in recovery is, do I believe everyone should do that? No, man, that's none of my business. What it comes down to is unto thy own self be true, and really finding out who Keith is and being honest about it, and not having fear. That's one of the biggest things. And I was telling Phil just before this, I was like, my motivation, I was on a trail run about an hour ago, is to come in here and just help people and be like, look, if I could help break through, I'm no expert on this by any stretch of the imagination, but what I can offer is 100% fact, is my experience. I mean, that's the truth. And that's that I have found it to be beneficial. I have found it to allow me to be able to take on the responsibilities and the duress of day-to-day life, to where it goes hand in hand with not needing to escape, not needing those anesthetics. And life is life. Everyone runs into troubles. But what this has helped me do is, utilize fitness, recover better, sleep better, think better, have a more positive approach and mindset, and to be able to relate with a lot more people in life, because I really found I was subpar. And I look back at my life and this timid nature that I've had when I was a youth at times, I really attribute that to having low T. I mean, this isn't something I just like, when I was 18 or when I was 28, all of a sudden I questioned, maybe I did. I always knew something was up, something was different. And after the therapy, what it's allowed me to do is realize that's why, Keegan acted that way. That's why Rob was acting that way. All these people in my life who had this more of a zeal, so to speak. And that's when it clicked. I went, oh, right. Because it's not just doing one thing. That's, if I were to relay one thing about testosterone, it is not just going to, make your bicep bigger. It is far beyond that, man. If I didn't work out, it wouldn't make me big. It's not like it's a super physiological thing. It's just, I've always worked out, man. that's been my jam. So what it's done is it's allowed me to take my hobby and enjoy it even more. And that in turn has allowed me to become more whole as a person and more content where, I know I'm okay today. I feel like I'm on the right path. I feel healthy. I know I'm making progress, as Phil says, emphasizing the word progress.
Just for today, right? Just for today.
Yeah.
I
This this moment.
moment. So I'm gonna get a little deep here just because if you don't mind, I'm fairly new to the recovery scene. I'm getting my 9 month chip next week. And I've had a lot of really deep conversations with Keith because he comes from somewhat of a similar background, if you don't mind, Keith. And you bring a perspective that I was kind of desperate for, having been in recovery for much longer than I have, and having so many different questions and feeling like kind of sometimes helpless sometimes, and not wanting to continue this type of path. So I appreciate you, Keith. I appreciate you being that kind of person for me. And, I just really value you, and I really value our friendship and our relationship, and I respect you. And I think that relationship may not necessarily happen based in the medical world, but because we've been able to connect on that specific thing in that specific world, I just want to highlight that. I want to give people hope that, hey, I'm just a human. Keith is just a human. Yeah, and the world views success on a variety of different levels, but going through the hell that I've gone through, and seeing some of the hells that Keith has gone through, it makes me realize we're on the same level, and we're here to help each other every step of the way. I mean, Keith has met with me on days when I've just been like horribly depressed. And I kind of want to shed a light on that. Like, we're real humans dealing with real problems, and just because we're on TRT, that's not going to go away. I mean, our minds, at least my mind, is pretty insane. And realizing that I don't sometimes have control of it is a very healthy thing. And to have another brother come along and be like, "Hey, man, I know exactly how you feel. I'm the exact same way, and this is how I dealt with it." That gives me a peace and a comfort that is incredible. So I kind of would like you just to expand a little bit more on our relationship with recovery, and just recovery specific, not how it's related to Teak, but kind of your story a little bit, because I think that's so important and gives people hope, if you don't mind.
Sure. Yeah. Boy, we're going in.
Well, brother, I told you, and I
Yeah. No,
can edit this out if you need me to.
no, you're good. No, you're good. It's just a state of vulnerability, right? There's a professional world, press, media, radio, TV, films, that whole thing.
I get it.
So in general, so if we're just talking recovery type, so I loved alcohol. Yeah, I absolutely loved it. I used to ride dirt bikes in Temecula, California, and it was kind of a dead end street for a drug addict. And as far as I was motivated to hit certain jumps and try for certain lap times on tracks and things like that, because it was always win-win for me. I crash, I get opiates, I make it, and I don't get hurt, and I made it, and I got better. So it was this horrible state, so to speak. I mean, we're talking fractured, was it T4, 5 compressed vertebrae, split my scapula in half, collarbone, wrist, hands, knees, everything. Like, I mean, it was just this bionic world for me. And what that taught me was, one, I may have a problem with drugs. Two, I couldn't stay away from them. It became this crutch that I found all too convenient, right? Whether it was a good day or a bad day. And I ended up leaving the state of California. This was about 11 years ago. And I actually moved into a halfway house in Phoenix. Horrible place, man. Absolutely horrible. And that kind of opened up my eyes. I actually became homeless. I lived on the streets of Phoenix. I'd tuck my sandals in my waistband because I didn't want anyone to steal them, and I'd sleep on a bus bench. And I was out of ideas. I was completely toast. I was just a shell of a person who once had so much ambition, and had parents who loved them, and brothers who were supportive and confused. And I put a lot of drama and trauma into the people's lives around me who loved me and wanted what was best for me. And yet they themselves couldn't help me, and they got frustrated, and I retaliated at their frustrations. And it was dark, how dark it is before the dawn. I moved up here. I went to a retreat, and I'm like, wait a minute, this is like an hour and a half from where I'm at, this like armpit of Satan, and I can go live up in the freaking Prescott. You got to be kidding. So I moved up here. It's mountain bike Disneyland. I love it. I started a whole new life up here. I started to get a smile on my face again. I went through an intensive program where I was there for a year, and they had you get a job and kind of tune up and save some money and be self-supportive and just kind of allow you this platform to regenerate your life. And I was seeing a therapist at the time, and long story short, she said that I should try some alternative stress relief. And so I did. And I went to yoga. When I came back, she's like, "How was it?" And I was like, "Oh, yeah, well, all right. You know, the instructor's pretty hot." She goes, "You need to ask her on a date." And I'm like beat down at that point. I'm like, okay, I guess low T. I'm like unmotivated. I was like, all right, I'll do it. You know, there's still some there, still a little bit. And so yeah, I haven't spent a day apart from her. She's my wife today. It's 10 years now down the road. You know, a whole new horizon has opened up. I went to Yavapai College back then, and I just got to look around and not live by other people's, Keith, if you do this, you'll be happy. If, you know, looking at other people, if I do what they do, I'll be happy. And it was this moment where I got to be with me, just me, and look around and go, you know, and really feel those desires in the heart that I believe the Lord put there. And that was start EMS. Like I've always wanted to do firefighting. I thought it was so far away from me. And so I did that, did EMT, worked as an EMT, did the Wizard paramedic program down in Peoria that started up at Sedona, and then went through the whole ambulance rigmarole for a while. And meanwhile, during this whole time, I started to develop this relationship with the power greater than me. I just call God. So simple. And I ran into some severe trials during some of those times, and that allowed me to get a relationship on a whole new level. And it started this dependency. The dependency I had put on all those other things was shifted over to this thing. And when the dependencies were over here, there was a bunch of consequences. And then I started to see the dependency over here, there's consequences, right? And it was just this compounding effect is that, you know, the more I do over here, the better everything gets, the more holistic I become, the more honest I become, the more real I get and progress in all those areas. And then one of the biggest shifts was I was sitting there on shift one day at the fire station. I was like, I don't believe this is how I can be the most help to other people. I just don't. I couldn't tell myself that it was, and I felt real idle, and worked a bunch of overtime and did like 7 classes on prereqs, turned in a resignation, got my pension, and started to go to ASU and Yavapai down the nursing deal, and realized that, you know, if I have more free time in my life, I want to help other people with those same sufferings in the context of what we're talking about. And working as a CRNA would open up vast opportunities for that. My wife and I could travel. We can go to different countries. I'd have more time off. Definitely won't have to fret about money too much. And I love that kind of stuff. I'm a very articulate guy. So if I could sit there and monitor a patient's vitals and consciousness and help them prepare for the surgery and help them after surgeries or operations, and to be there for them and to help heal them and to help them just in that specific capacity, and then go home and, you know, go live life. So that's the perspective I have, at least currently. If we talked in 2 years, it might be completely different.
Oh, I love your perspective, man. And I really appreciate the authenticity because I think it's going to help people, man. There's so much out there that's like, I'm afraid to share my story, but the story is all that we have, right? I mean, that's how it shapes us. Like, we're shaped because of our story. Like, I am who I am because of what I've been through and what you've been through. That's the way you are. And I think our friendship has grown so much just because of your story and your authenticity. And that's kind of really the only kind of relationships I want now. You know, I want to have friendships that are real and that we get into each other's business and we talk about what's real. So thank you for sharing that. And I told you kind of before I started the interview, the whole reason I'm doing is I want to change the stigma behind young people fixing their lives and helping themselves. And if a hormone imbalance is a problem, let's at least investigate it, right? Like let's talk and enter into the conversation. And yeah, I am going to get into your kitchen. I'm going to ask you about your morning wood, or whether you're able to get it up, or whether you're able to maintain your erections and all these types of things. But I'm also going to ask you about the brain fog and the inability to lose weight and all these other things. And then I'm going to rule out what it couldn't be. Like, is it an infection? Is it your thyroid? Is it is it anemia? Is it all these other things that it could be? I'll rule those things out so we can actually see if it's actually hypogonadism or low testosterone. So my question to you, Keith, is what would you tell a young guy who is exhausted, feeling pretty hopeless that both you and I have felt in our lives, whether on T or not on T? What do you have to share with those guys? What do you
Well, very generalized, right? I would say something to the effect of, contrary to what everyone might be telling you, you're not doing anything wrong. And I know that may be hard to believe. I know that may sound like lip service. We're all put here for a reason. And that's just the fact of the matter, is that each of us have an individual role to play here. And that's going to look different for each person. And along the way, everyone's going to have the same difficulties. You know, I don't look at anyone else's difficulties different than mine. They're fundamentally based, I believe, and have been shown in a spiritual nature, and that there is a methodical way to approach it, that there's a lot outside of our knowledge that we're just not aware of. You know, yeah, we're in 2024, but let's just rewind the tape to what, 19, I think it was 25, somewhere around there, right? This guy, he found insulin, right? He isolated it. Okay. So this dude, he's realizing it's this chain sequence of amino acids, and technically it's a peptide, and the FDA approved that in 1 year, right? It took 1 year back then because they realized that people who are deficient, right, or have a decreased sensitivity for type 2, type 1, you know, whatever way you want to look at it, they found that some of these people are just innately born a certain way, right? They're off trying to fulfill their role, and something got in the way, right? And now, fortunately, the doctors are like, hey, if you take this, you can now go further. You can not have that symptomology that you're experiencing. And everyone grabbed that, you know, and ran with it. You know, now enter into 2024, and we have TB 500, BPC 157, you name it. We can go Ipramilion, CJC 1295. I can keep going. I mean, there's a whole bunch of stuff that's out there that I believe God's helped us be made aware of to help us, you know, and I believe it. Yes.
Those are not anabolic steroids. Those are peptide.
Yeah.
Those are peptides. Those are not anabolic steroids, and they work on certain proteins in our body to do certain functions. So I just want to make that distinction, because a lot of people don't know all these things that you're saying. So those peptides that help us, that we do provide through our clinic, but and those we only provide it after we optimize a person's hormones, because we want to make sure we rule out the underlying issues that are natural in a body. All right, keep going. Sorry.
Good. So anyway, man, the whole thing to that soul out there, younger fella, is like, you may be experiencing something that, one, you can't overcome on your own and you might need help. Two, there's people like myself and Phil that have run into these walls in our own lives, and we found a way out. And our job simply would be to lay out these tools that we've found and let you inspect. Now, I'm definitely not going to sit here and say I know what's best for you, you know, hypothetically speaking to that individuals. I just don't. I really don't. But if you find yourself in a similar situation, you have similar symptomologies, maybe you've done a little bit of homework, or you hit one of us up and ask us to help you with getting some homework done. If you have questions or anything, you see me around town, I don't care. You can stop and talk to me. It's no problem. That's part of my role that I have found, is that I am to help other people in any way possible. And I'll be honest, I kind of like that feeling of, you know, not being a part of the main thinking, right? I mean, I think it's an honor at this point, but there's a lot of uphill work. And I personally don't believe everyone could perhaps benefit from TRT. I just don't. Like, a buddy of mine's dad, for instance, he's 67. It's his stepdad. His levels are at 780. His free T's like 33. Like, does that guy? No, nor would I think he'd even come in and be like, you know, I think I have a problem. No, homeboy's running around on the trails, you know, he's got a sweet life, you know, he doesn't experience these symptoms, right?
And then I'm asking the question, how do I be like you, or that? Well, I know at 7 something, that ship's already sailed for me. but like, what has he done in his life to maintain the levels that are as high as they are? You know, that's kind of amazing to me. You know, I had another guy that was like, he was having symptoms of low T. He was referred to me by another patient, and he was old. He was old, like 70, late 70s, early 80s, and he had a T of like seven something. And I'm like, dude, I'm not gonna touch you. Like whatever
That's
you're doing,
awesome,
absolutely right. Like I am sorry, I have no answers for you. I wrote a letter to his doctor, and I'm like, I can't help this guy.
man.
Back to you because there's nothing that I can do for him. This guy's an absolute stud, and he was an absolute stud. I mean, everything looked great, and so like everything. And I you know, sometimes you're stumped. You're like, there's something else going on. You know, you need to start looking for the zebras. You know, like adrenaline insufficiency or something else. You know, that I don't test for, but yeah, those guys are out there, and I appreciate meeting them. But it gives you that opportunity to kind of be like, what are you doing right? You know, what have you done in your life? He's like, well, I eat organic foods. I'm like, well, that helps. I exercise
Yeah.
every day. Well, you know, not sex daily. I don't know what it is, but it's like, oh, check, 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 or not check, not check, whatever.
Yeah.
Not everybody needs tea, and I will be also the second person to say that not everybody needs tea, and I do encounter a bunch of those people too. So with that, I will say, hey, if you're having symptoms of low T, the brain fog, low libido, can't get it up, all these types of things, at least get yourself checked. Take a symptom checklist. Let's have that conversation. And you know, it doesn't cost a lot, and there's no commitment to actually trying to get on T. I just want to have the conversation with guys because I think that we can help a lot of people if they're just willing to have the conversation and if they're just willing to be vulnerable. And that is the biggest issue that I kind of run into is young guys kind of being embarrassed about having these conversations. And if I wasn't intentional about combating that, and if I personally wasn't willing to be authentic with my own doctor when I got on this, then my life would not have been changed for the better. So there's my soapbox.
There you go. That works. And I admit, I remember filling out that questionnaire in the lobby, and I kind of had some mixed feelings, you know, but I was just honest. I just wrote down, you know, this, that, and yeah, those questions did come up. They're personal questions, and as men, I honestly believe that we can talk about that. You know, that's not some faux pas thing that we should just push to the side. Is that we are men? You know, I believe God made us as men, and with being a man comes certain attributes. And one of the things I learned is a super smart guy, Fred Killingbeck. One of the most powerful things I learned in the endocrinology section in Medic was he said hormones, and then he stopped. And he says, they interpret our version of reality. And that's all he said about it. And he goes, think about that. And this guy I wish you can get Fred on here, man. Holy smokes. He's amazing. But after he said that, that resonated. And that stuck back in my mind. And I'm like, wow, you know, that's powerful.
I'm taking that one. Say that one more time. What? Say that one more time.
So he said hormones, and he paused. And then he said, they interpret our version of reality. And he sat there and he said, you think about that.
Yeah.
He's a man of many words. And so when Fred does these little pauses, they're emphatic.
That's pretty amazing, man. Like that. I really like that. I'm going to steal that one because I think that is so good. Yeah. Thank you for sharing that. Now, just we'll close up. Thank you, first off, for taking the time.
Anytime, man.
Yeah. I just appreciate the hell out of you, man. And our friendship and the daily texts that we continue to have with each other. So thank you for coming on here. The last thing I want to ask is how have we been for you? How has Tri-City Men's Health been for you? Was it a net positive? And if it's not, what can I do to be better for you?
Well, and I'll just be real. I mean, I was the one who came in with quite a lot of ambition for this. You know, I was probably the guy who may have had less questions, but more inquisitive. You know, let's talk about something. That really had nothing to, I was like, I'm in, you know, I'm in. But the point is like, there was a time where I actually wanted to pause my treatment, and I did. And I hit up Tim and I'm like, hey man, I don't know how you deal with this, but can I just pause for a little bit? I just want to kind of get a little baseline and kind of see, because it's not like, you know, you stop, it falls off like a cliff. I wanted to feel again what that was, to have it kind of go down. And it only took like 4 or 5, about 6 weeks. And then I hit you guys up again, and there was no You guys didn't give me a hassle whatsoever. I mean, it was just like, yeah, no problem. Hey, man, I hope the best for you. If we could help you out in any way. I mean, there was just like, that is the definition of no strings, right? And no financial burdens that really came about. And as soon as I was like, hey, man, I'd like to give her a go, yeah, no problem, man. Just come by. Just everything got set up again, just no problem. And it's been smooth, to be honest with you. And I have great conversations with them. They're good people. Like, I can't stress that enough. Is like, I kind of look forward to going down there sometimes, and I could sit there and talk for a bit. It's just, they're just really good people. So I encourage anyone to experience it and see what I'm talking about if you're curious.
My camera died, but that doesn't matter.
Oh, I thought that was me. I'm like, what, dude? I just charged it.
Yeah, yeah. I forgot to charge it last night. This happened earlier. I had to reschedule another interview that I did earlier. Keith, thank you so much.
Yeah.
I really, really, really appreciate you. And yeah, man, I'm gonna let you know when this is edited.